Well, thanks everybody for joining today. I hope at this point you are able to see my screen. You should be seeing a title slide saying 5 steps to giving feedback. Assuming that's correct, I'll just dive right in. A little bit about myself. For those who I've not worked with previously, my name is Arturo Gavilanes, and I work for University Recreation. I'm the climbing wall coordinator and the challenge program coordinator. And so via the challenge program, we do group dynamic work. So conflict resolution, team building, leadership, problem solving, oftentimes with students, but we also work with faculty and staff. And so one of the common conversation points that I see is a conversation around feedback and what do you do with your feedback? And so I'm hoping to dive into that today. I'm anticipating this is maybe 15 minutes, but I also want to encourage everybody to ask questions and participate to the best of your ability. This is going to be much more valuable use of all of our times if it's a back and forth rather than me talking at you. So feel free to interrupt, ask questions as you see fit. So with that said, feedback, as we all know, has a lot of different associations with it. So it's potentially giving advice, it's providing ideas, it's giving a little bit of insight into what folks do, especially in a work setting. Feedback can be really critical about communicating an observation. So I want to outline 5 steps here. And so the first thing that I'm going to ask is to keep in mind is this acronym STOP. Whenever we are giving feedback, the STOP acronym is going to be useful. So the STOP acronym is going to be directed towards a specific, timely, objective, and purposeful. And that all it means to imply that feedback should be specific, timely, objective, and purposeful. So let's use an example. I see myself careening forward. I miss my, coincidentally, a stop sign, and you need to give me feedback. You're sitting in my passenger seat and I just ran this stop sign. Rather than just screaming and like clutching the sides of the vehicle, what is some feedback that you could give me about that interaction?
You could do, like, for example, you could say, per whatever driving, whatever state you're in, you need to make sure you come to a complete stop before moving forward.
Right. Not to be confused with the California stop, which this might be reminiscent of. But absolutely, hey, Arturo, you didn't come to a full stop. That's absolutely specific, and there's not really much I need to do other than to interpret that. I mean, I'm also a big fan of if you choose to chime in, feel free to toss things into the chat. I am monitoring the chat, so feel free to do so. Did you see that stop sign? Honestly, it is a form of feedback, and it's specific. Hey, I don't know if you just realized, but you missed that stop sign, or did you see that stop sign? It's a way to start that conversation. So let's continue. Similarly, with this scenario, you watch me run that stop sign, and this time let's look at timely. I think your point there being that it shouldn't be passive aggressive, or it's not intended to be passive aggressive, is very important though. Keeping in mind whenever we're giving that feedback, our tonality can have a major impact on the interaction. So you gave me specific feedback and it was, hey Arturo, you ran a stop sign. What would timely feedback in this situation look like? Usually I like to wait about 7 seconds before I answer my own question. So if you're wondering why there's a slightly too long pause, that's why. During or right afterwards? Right afterwards is, and during are both great examples. You wouldn't wait 2 weeks, right? Like imagine we're driving and then 2 weeks later you stop me to tell me, hey, by the way, 2 weeks ago, you ran a stop sign. Like, okay, I just might not be as bought into receiving that feedback at that point in time. So timely is going to be really, really important. On the opposite side of that spectrum, imagine I'm driving up to that stop sign, you're in the passenger seat, and I haven't even gotten to the stop sign, and you're like, hey, 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 watch out, there's a stop sign right there. That certainly is a little too timely. In a different scenario, if I'm speaking and there's spinach in my teeth and you tell me 2 weeks later that I had spinach in my teeth, well, I can't really do anything about it at this point. And if you tell me while I'm speaking that there's spinach in my teeth, you might actually throw me off my train of thought. So there's a little bit of nuance there. Let's carry on though. So now we're looking at objective feedback. So I ran the stop sign, I've got objective on the board. What would objective look like? And we might have already kind of given an example of it previously. Yeah, follow the driving laws. That's absolutely objective. There isn't necessarily a personal tone with that. That is an objective fact. Encourage more attention to your surroundings. Absolutely. I think the key piece with objective is subjective might have been you could have killed us. Absolutely done. And I think that's a key piece of this intentionality here. You're not making it about the driver or yourself. There is an objective fact, and the objective fact is you ran that stop sign, and running a stop sign is illegal. And so whenever you're providing feedback, not to turn this into a workshop about stop signs, whenever you're providing feedback, you want to maintain as objective a approach as you can, because it's going to make feedback a little bit more likely to land with the person receiving the feedback. And finally, P is purposeful. And again, we might have already seen some examples of purposeful, but with purposeful, we're looking for an intention. There's an outcome. As a result of the feedback you have all provided me, I am now equipped to identify that I run stop signs regularly. You just watched me run 4 of them in a row, and that probably should be a little bit of a cautionary tale for you there. So what would purposeful feedback look like? If you could frame a bit of feedback that you would give me about the scenario, how might you frame it? I think if we combine a few of what we've done so far, we can get a really solid statement on the situation. Hey, Arturo, you ran that stop sign. By the way, I don't truly value my safety being put at risk. In the future, please be more mindful of that. And if you really want to take that whole interaction a little bit further, you can even say, would you like me to point it out? Which I've certainly done with friends in the past. I remember having a friend who was about to run a red light, and it was 2 a.m. while he was driving, and I didn't want to like nitpick or backseat drive him, but at the same time, it's like, hey, it's 2 a.m. Do you want me to let you know if I see these things, or do you want me to let you do your thing? Yeah, when I'm with you, I will feel safer if you do not run stop signs. Absolutely. And fun fact, running stop signs is typically bad for your health. So let's do a quick practice round. I'm thinking a couple moments to review my resume. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is, if you have the ability on your computer, I'm going to ask you to go to the annotate tool. So you should be able to move your mouse cursor to the very top of the screen where it says you are viewing Arturo Gavilanes' screen. Next to it, it's going to say view options, and then you're going to hit annotate. From there, you can draw, stamp, arrow, text, however you see fit. Feel free to provide feedback. So if, for example, you think, Arturo, your last name is not underlined. Hey, everybody's picking up on that one. You'll notice that there's that ability to annotate, interact, and let me know. So take maybe, let's say 80 seconds. 80 seconds to annotate, identify what you would provide me feedback on, and keep in mind some of these things I might ask questions on as the receiver of the feedback for clarity. So I encourage you to be ready to have feedback that is in compliance with stop at the ready. So I'll go ahead and start like acknowledging some of the things that I'm seeing, but feel free to keep populating this image. So my G is lowercase on my last name. Different fonts would look more professional. I appreciate that you put a recommendation as well. I might just not have the knowledge, right, to identify what is going to be the more professional font. Maybe I liked the way Comic Sans was. Regardless, giving me the recommendation certainly helps me in the process and is very specific. Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Anybody willing to speak to that bit of feedback? I'm curious. Or feel free to write it out in the chat. Capitalizing. Those are applications within the software, right? So that makes sense. They should be capitalized. I'd ask Open Door if anybody has any other feedback that they're willing to speak towards. I see a handful of different things on this list. Feel free to let me know why you annotated what you did and what you would do differently. And again, keep in mind, this is an opportunity to practice using stop. With should probably be written out. Third year might be a formatting issue. I know Wazoo definitely is going to look unprofessional on a resume. Change all the acronyms to proper words. So Wazoo to Washington State University, etc. Typically bad form to do and as an ampersand, right? And so maybe I want to do a written out and, or be more consistent. I know that some of you may have noticed there's different font sizes here. Third year, absolutely. This is a dated resume, by the way. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, but this is no longer my most up-to-date one. Yeah, these are not usually relevant. Works well alone, with others, with the lights off, and with animals. Like that's just some random scatter shot of skills there. So cool. I'm going to clear all of our annotations and carry us forward. Thank you, everybody. So there's that component, what to do with it, right? Hobbies, going back to that resume, might not have been relevant there. Fair enough. I'll keep that in mind on my next resume. So it's up to you what to do with feedback. I think one of the beauties of feedback is at the end of the day, nobody can force me to implement a bit of feedback. If somebody says, Arturo, you pace around too much while you're presenting. Okay, that's fair. And they might be absolutely around. If that's something that helps me with my ability to present, like I don't actually have to do anything about that. Now, I still do need to hear that person out. The beauty of feedback is there's nothing mandating that I update my resume, right? So I can take any bits and pieces of what you all gave me there and I can choose what to implement. Though I do need to outline, if you're not using the feedback, you know, enough people provided a lot of feedback there, I'm really hurting myself. And by that I mean, you have to take into consideration the fact that the person who's giving you feedback really didn't have to give you the feedback, unless they're someone who likes to nitpick folks as a hobby. Like giving feedback can really be a position of vulnerability, where someone's outlining something and they're really just trying to do you a solid and help you out. And so it's worth being cognizant of that feedback. So when you're receiving feedback, I think some of the key things that I recommend to a lot of my staff and a lot of the professionals that I work with whenever we deliver this training is to say thank you. As a person receiving feedback, regardless what the feedback is, I'm just gonna sit there and thank you for that feedback. I'm not gonna do myself any favors by justifying what my decisions were. For example, I could have gone down the rabbit hole of like why I think Comic Sans should be a professional font, but that's not the time and place for the conversation. Think about the person's perspective. If I'm getting information on my resume from a lot of student affairs professionals, I think that's pretty valuable. If I'm getting information about my resume from a bunch of 5-year-olds, not to say that I don't value their opinion, but I'd be curious why I'm getting so much feedback on my resume from 5-year-olds. As an individual receiving feedback, asking questions for clarification. Hey, why can't I use an ampersand here? I think that's really valuable in understanding that feedback. And then restating feedback just so you have a comprehension and you show to that individual giving you feedback. That can be really helpful as well. There's this proverb that I really like to refer to with the concept of feedback. So I'm just going to move this real quick. There you go. If one person says that you're a horse, smile at them. If 2 people say you're a horse, give it some thought. And if 3 people say you're a horse, go buy a saddle. And that really just speaks to the fact that at some point, if you're giving feedback significantly often or frequently enough, you do yourself a favor in heeding that feedback. So worth keeping in mind. The last thing I want to do with feedback is give a little bit of why. So this is a competency scale that I think we might all be familiar with. And this really identifies where an individual might be in terms of learning a skill. We work with students, we work with other professionals, we're in a learning environment. So learning skills is not an uncommon situation around us. So unconscious incompetence is going to speak towards, I don't know what I don't know. Conscious incompetence is, I know what I don't know. For example, unconscious incompetence. I didn't know that Comic Sans was unprofessional. Conscious incompetence is me choosing to use Comic Sans even though I know it's unprofessional. I'm aware of that, or sorry, that's not true. I'm aware that I don't know what I don't know. That makes sense. Conscious competence is I'm aware of my abilities. And unconscious competence is I'm kind of on autopilot. I'll use a similar driving example. When I was 5 years old, unconscious incompetence, I did not know what all the lights meant. I did not know that there was all this information ahead of me. There was just people on the road and they somehow magically knew what to do. As I grew older, I became more aware of the lines and the lights, and there was some format, but I didn't know exactly what they were. So I was aware that there was a gap on learning. Eventually, after going through driver's ed and practicing, I got to the point where I was aware of all those skills associated with driving. And then unconscious competence. At this point, I can be on autopilot in my vehicle. I get in the car, I do my thing. There isn't a stressor, and it works towards mastery. Where feedback fits into this whole thing, and the why that I'm using this competency scale is feedback helps outline the unconscious component. You can help somebody identify something, one of their blind spots, and help progress a student, staff member to conscious incompetence to help easily transition that that learning. So I believe that's all I have for us. I do want to thank everybody for their time. It was a lot of talking at you, and I do appreciate your engagement throughout. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. You can reach me at arturo.gavilanes@wsu.edu. You can reach out to me at my program through University Recreation. I'll hang out a bit if anybody has questions. Otherwise, feel free to take off.